$112.58 billion. That's the estimated size of the global market for neurological disorder drugs, just for this year.
Yeah, it's a huge number.
Think about that for a second. I mean, over $100 billion, just focused on conditions impacting, our brains, our nervous systems.
It really puts the scale of the challenge into perspective and the potential for innovation, too.
Absolutely. And for this deep dive, we've been looking at a pretty comprehensive market research report.
That's right. It confirms that staggering figure, but also looks ahead, projects where this really crucial market is going.
So our mission really is to pull out the key insights for you. What's driving the growth? What are the hurdles? And, what really matters?
Exactly. The need-to-know stuff.
Okay, so let's dive right in. That big number, USD 112.58 billion in 2025. Where does the report say it's heading?
Well, the projections are quite significant. By 2033, they're anticipating the market hitting USD 182.17 billion.
Wow, that's a huge jump.
It really is a substantial expansion in, just under a decade.
Nearly $70 billion more in just 8 years. Now, to get a feel for that pace, the report mentions a CAGR compound annual growth rate of 6.20%. CAGR always sounds a bit technical. Can we break that down a bit, make it simpler?
Yeah, sure. Think of it like a savings account. If it grew by roughly the same percentage each year, that's kind of what CAGR represents.
Okay.
It smooths out the ups and downs over the whole period. So 6.20% here just signals, pretty consistent, fairly robust growth for this massive market year after year.
Right. So it's not just big now, it's steadily getting much bigger. Okay, let's talk geography. Where's this growth happening? The report breaks it down, and it looks like North America is leading, right?
That's correct. For 2025, North America holds over 40% of the global market share.
Over 40%. So that's what, USD 41.66 billion just this year? Why so dominant?
Well, it's a mix of things, really. You've got very advanced healthcare systems there, high spending on R&D, plus many of the world's biggest pharma companies are based there. And crucially, there's a high prevalence of these disorders, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, MS in the population. That drives demand.
Makes sense. Is North America's growth keeping pace with that global average, that 6.2%?
Actually, it's projected slightly below that. The CAGR for North America 2025 to 2033 is forecast at 5.0%. Still strong, but a bit slower than the overall global rate.
Interesting.
And if you look within North America, the U.S. is the giant, obviously USD 32.87 billion this year, growing at 4.8%.
Right.
But interestingly, Canada and Mexico are projected to grow a bit faster.
Oh, what are their numbers looking like?
Canada's at about USD 5 billion, 4.99 billion in 2025 with a projected CAGR of 5.8%. And Mexico's USD 3.79 billion, growing at 5.5%.
So noticeably faster growth there. Any idea why?
It could be several things. Maybe increasing access to healthcare services, maybe better diagnosis rates, perhaps more investment in their healthcare infrastructure starting to show results in market terms.
Okay, so North America. Current leader, but slightly more measured growth ahead. What's the second biggest region?
That would be Europe, holding over 30% of the market in 2025.
Over 30%.
Yeah, comes in at USD 32.65 billion this year. And the projected CAGR for Europe overall is 5.3% through to 2033.
And within Europe, any standout countries for market size or growth?
Yes, definitely. Germany has the largest market in Europe, about USD 6.46 billion in 2025, growing at 5.5%.
Okay.
The UK is next, USD 5.49 billion, but with a slightly higher growth rate projected, 6.1%. So maybe a faster trajectory there.
Interesting.
Russia's also quite significant, over 5 billion, though its growth is forecast a bit lower, 4.3%. And you have France, Italy, Spain. They're around the 2.5 to 3 billion mark,
Right.
with growth rates in the mid-4s.
Right.
And it's worth noting some smaller markets show solid growth too. Sweden at 5.4%, Denmark 5.1%, even Luxembourg. Tiny market size, but 5.6% growth projected.
So lots of variation even within Europe. Now, the report mentioned one region with really rapid growth. That's Asia Pacific, right?
Precisely, APAC. Currently, it's about 23% of the global market share,
Okay, 23%.
which is USD 27.02 billion in 2025. But the really eye-catching number is the projected CAGR, 9.0% between now and 2033.
9%. Wow, that's significantly higher than North America or Europe.
by a long shot. It makes it the fastest growing region by far.
What's fueling that? Why such explosive growth in APAC?
Well, it's a convergence of factors. You've got rapidly aging populations in many key countries there.
Right, which means more age-related neurological issues.
Exactly. At the same time, healthcare infrastructure is improving significantly across the region. Access is getting better.
Okay.
Awareness of these conditions is rising too, leading to more diagnoses. And on top of that, governments are investing heavily in healthcare and pharma research. It all feeds into that growth.
Can you give us some country specifics? Where's this growth really taking off?
Sure. China's a huge driver. USD 11.35 billion market this year, projected growth 8.5%.
Strong.
And India, smaller market now, USD 2.7 billion. But look at the growth rate, 10.9% CAGR projected.
10.9. That's huge.
It really is. South Korea, Taiwan also strong around 8%. Southeast Asia as a whole, almost 10%. Even established markets like Japan and Australia are seeing robust growth, 7.5%, 8.3%. Singapore's another standout at 9.3%.
So the picture in Asia-Pacific is just dynamic, really accelerating.
Absolutely. That's where a lot of the future action is going to be.
Okay. The report touches on other regions too, South America, Middle East, Africa, smaller shares, but what's happening there briefly?
Right, quickly then. South America is just over 5% share, USD 4.28 billion this year. Still respectable growth, 5.3% CAGR. Brazil and Argentina are notably strong within the region, over 7% growth each.
Okay.
Middle East, about 2% share, USD 4.5 billion. But stronger growth forecast, 6.7% CAGR, especially in Saudi Arabia and the UAE, again around 7%.
And Africa?
Africa's the smallest, around 1% share, USD 2.48 billion. And the growth is more modest, 2.4% CAGR overall. South Africa is the biggest market there.
Got it. So growth happening everywhere, but clearly different paces. Okay, let's pivot back to the why. What's really driving this global expansion overall? Key market drivers.
Well, the big one is simply the rising prevalence of these disorders. We mentioned the aging global population.
Yeah.
That directly links to more Alzheimer's, more Parkinson's.
Right.
But it's also MS, epilepsy, other conditions. The WHO flags these as major causes of disability and death worldwide. So the need is just massive and growing.
Any examples of how the market is responding to that need?
Yeah, the report mentions, for instance, Pfizer getting FDA approval for Zavicefta PVTM back in March in 2023. That's for migraine, a very widespread neurological issue.
Yeah.
Shows ongoing efforts to meet these needs.
Okay, so growing need is number one. What else is pushing the market forward?
The other major driver is advancements in drug discovery and development. This is really crucial.
That's so.
We're seeing breakthroughs thanks to new technologies like AI, machine learning, genomics, finding better biomarkers.
The tech influence.
Exactly. These tools help researchers find new drug targets, speed up development, make therapies more precise, like Biohaven's announcement in March 23 about a new oral dual inhibitor for neurological illnesses. That's a direct result of this kind of innovation.
So more people needing treatment and better tools to create those treatments. That sounds positive. But are there any roadblocks the report mentioned or restraint?
Yes, there's a significant one. Cost. The high cost of many of these drugs, especially the newer ones like biologics, gene therapies, they can be incredibly expensive.
Right.
And while they might offer huge benefits, that price tag limits affordability, limits access, even where demand is high. Plus, the clinical trials for these complex drugs are long and expensive, which also adds to the final cost.
That's the classic tension, isn't it? Innovation versus access. Okay, let's look at trends shaping the future. What's emerging?
One big trend is the increasing adoption of gene therapy and personalized medicine.
Okay, tell me more.
These approaches aim to get at the root causes, often genetic, of these disorders. The idea is more targeted treatments, potentially longer-lasting effects, and fewer side effects because they're tailored to the individual. It's a big shift.
Sounds potentially revolutionary. What's another key trend?
Just the sheer amount of ongoing investment in R&D for completely novel therapies. Companies, research institutions, they're pouring money into things like stem cell therapy, neuroprotective agents, drugs to stop damage getting worse, and monoclonal antibodies targeting specific disease pathways.
So really pushing the boundaries.
Absolutely. Trying to tackle the unmet needs that still exist for so many of these conditions.
Okay, so lots of scientific momentum. Now, the report also brings up something more external, political almost. The impact of those tariffs reintroduced by the Trump administration in April 2025.
Yes, that's a significant development. It could have pretty wide-ranging effects on the pharma market, including this one.
What exactly are these tariffs?
The report outlines tariffs from 10% up to, well, as high as 46% on various pharma goods. Things like APIs, the active ingredients, packaging materials, manufacturing machinery, specifically from China and India.
Those are hefty percentages. What are the likely consequences?
Several things. For U.S. companies, probably increased production costs because imported materials get more expensive. Potential supply chain disruptions, delays, as companies maybe look for new suppliers.
Right, hassle and cost.
Exactly. Plus, navigating the new rules is complex. Generic drug makers could be hit hard, as they often rely heavily on lower-cost APIs from China and India.
Makes sense.
Biopharma. Vaccines, too. Tariffs on things like specialized media or cold chain packaging could raise their costs. CMOs, the contract manufacturers, might need to find and qualify new suppliers, which takes time and money.
Any wider impacts?
Well, there's the risk of retaliatory tariffs from, say, the EU on U.S. pharma exports. That hurts competitiveness abroad. And concerns about clinical trials being delayed if the necessary drugs or kits become more expensive or harder to source due to tariffs.
So it really could ripple through the whole system. Sounds like good market intelligence is going to be vital.
Absolutely critical. The report stresses that. Companies need real-time data on API prices, supplier reliability, the exact tariff impact, alternative sourcing options, just to navigate this new landscape.
A major external pressure point. Okay, shifting focus back inside the industry, the companies themselves. What's the competitive landscape like?
It's highly competitive, as you'd expect. You've got the major global players heavily involved: Biogen, Novartis, Pfizer, J&J, Merck, GSK. They all have significant stakes.
And what's their main focus?
A lot of it is R&D, pouring resources into developing innovative therapies, biologics, gene therapies, personalized medicine. That's where they see the future.
The report mentions some specific company moves.
Yes, a couple of examples. Acadia Pharma getting FDA approval for DAYBUE for Rett syndrome in March 23. That's a new therapy hitting the market. And AbbVie buying Sindesi Therapeutics in March 22. That shows a big player strengthening its neuroscience pipeline through acquisitions.
Strategic moves.
Definitely. The report lists several top companies: Sun Pharma, Novartis, Biogen, Roche, Sanofi, Orion, AbbVie, UCB, Teva. It gives you a sense of the key players involved.
It's clearly a dynamic field. Lastly, the report segments the market in interesting ways by disorder, by drug class, by how drugs are distributed. Can you walk us through those highlights?
Sure. So looking at it by disorder type, Alzheimer's disease drugs are currently the biggest segment,
Why is that?
mainly due to the high prevalence in that aging population we talked about and the focus on managing symptoms. But the fastest growing segment by disorder, that's Parkinson's disease drugs.
Ah, okay. And the reason?
Rising incidence of Parkinson's, plus those advancements we mentioned, gene therapy, neuroprotective agents, they offer new hope and are driving growth in that specific area.
Makes sense. What about if you slice it by drug class?
By drug class, anti-epileptic drugs currently hold the biggest share. They're widely used, long established for managing epilepsy and seizures, lots of formulations available.
Okay, the mainstay. And fastest growing here.
That would be antipsychotic drugs.
Really? Why?
Driven by, well, the increasing prevalence of various psychiatric and neurological conditions where these drugs are used, plus innovation in the drugs themselves. Newer, second-generation antipsychotics are being adopted more.
Interesting. And finally, distribution. How do these meds get to patients?
The dominant channel right now is hospital pharmacies. That makes sense for specialized care, immediate access for severe conditions, drugs needing specific handling.
Right, the critical care setting.
But the fastest growing channel, online pharmacies.
Ah, the convenience factor.
Exactly. Convenience, home delivery, especially for chronic conditions needing regular refills. And of course, the pandemic really accelerated that shift to online.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this all up. We've got this huge global market for neurological drugs, well over $100 billion, and it's set for strong growth, hitting maybe $180 billion by 2033.
That's the picture.
Growth driven by aging populations, more diagnoses, but also really exciting science: AI, gene therapy, new R&D. Asia-Pacific is the region to watch for the fastest expansion. But there are challenges. The high cost of these new drugs is a big one, limiting access, and external factors like trade tariffs are now adding another layer of complexity.
That's a key takeaway.
Competition is fierce among the big pharma companies, constantly innovating and making strategic moves. And how we segment the market by disorder, drug type, or even how it's sold shows different growth dynamics within the larger picture.
It's a complex but absolutely vital area of healthcare, constantly evolving.
It really is. So, considering all this, the rapid change, the science, the economics, Here's something for you, our listener, to think about. Looking ahead, say, to 2030, what might be the biggest surprise? What unexpected breakthrough or maybe unforeseen challenge could pop up that these forecasts don't fully capture yet?
That's a fascinating question.
Definitely something to mull over.